There are 7.5 billion living souls on planet Earth. How could we all possibly be relevant? We are all relevant because within each of us is a custom-built, unique story. We are all significant, we do matter, and I'm going to prove it one amazing story at a time. My home province of Ontario makes up 0.2% of the global population, and we're going to start there. One day, I will call on you. Hey, I'm your host David Joyce, and this is episode 2 of the series Richard's Journey. Richard lives with severe OCD, and he is gracious enough to give us a little peek behind his curtain. If you haven't listened to the first episode, I suggest you do, but here's a recap before we get started. First, we hear about the murder of his father.
Went to the cupboard, opened the cupboard, reaching up in the cupboard, and then was shot from through the kitchen window, as far as I understand.
Then the obsession of cross-contamination is born after a sewage backup in their apartment complex.
And the only person that we could get was a plumber, but they actually only worked at the morgue.
And the last episode ends when Richard reveals he confined himself to his room for over 2 years.
I stayed in bed, and the only time I got out of bed was to go to the washroom. And when I went to the washroom, I had to have a shower.
And that's where we're going to pick up the conversation in this episode. Let's go.
I limited to what I ate. I limited what I would drink. Therefore, I didn't have to go to the bathroom. And bathroom is one of my key places that, I don't like.
Right.
The toilet is a big bad monster to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I would sometimes not drink anything for 12 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours a day. And it was only when Mike or anybody else would force it upon me that I would. And it caused complications. Obviously, you don't go to the bathroom like that. And then when you do, you have lots of complications that follow. So I could feel health was going to become a big issue.
Right.
And it's pretty bad when you buy a pair of running shoes and they last 6 years and they look like they just got out of the box. You've not put them on your feet but once a year to go out the door. And in the other aspect is you go out the door and you could see development in your local area, like they built a building or whatever. So the last time you go out your own residence, and then there's like, oh, wow, they built this over here. This is something that everybody gets up at 5 a.m. and walks out the door and watches happen progressively. I go out and notice new trees, and it's like, oh, wow, that grew. Or, oh, wow, they built that. That's cool. That's
like time lapse.
It was.
Yeah.
And being in bed like that, and and a whole world of everything going on in your mind, I developed gaming. Once I started to pick up a PlayStation console, I stopped thinking about OCD. I was absolutely, it feels like I'm 100% OCD free when I'm sitting there playing a video game.
Right.
Because in a video game, you gotta think about what you're doing and your next moves and everything else like that. It absolutely overpowered the constant daily thoughts of, hey, like, that's dirty, don't touch it.
Right.
Like, what do you got to do tomorrow? What is it going to be? What's that going to mean? And it just overpowered all that.
Wow. What kind of games were you playing?
No, all the sports games, because none of, like, video games were never something that was appealing. So it was all the sports games, things like hockey, and got into NASCAR because hockey went through periods of lockouts. So it was like, oh, there's no hockey on. What am I also going to watch on a weekend? Being trapped in my bed, it was like, well, I'll start watching racing on a Saturday and, on a Sunday.
So Richard got pretty good at gaming, but more important, his tiny world started to open up thanks to the social aspects integrated within the game.
You tried to find like-minded people because obviously when you get together and you're spending several hours gaming, you start to conversate. So always the first things is all, what you got going on? You got a wife, kids, what's going on for a job? And this, everything I tried to avoid, like I was like, no. So one of the first guys I hooked up was on house arrest.
Right.
And it was quite a character because he was going through similar things, but not quite OCD, but he didn't want to tell everybody, hey, I'm I'm sitting here because I'm on house arrest for I was caught with selling marijuana plants and grow op and all that stuff. So his excuse was he got in a car accident and that messed up his arms and messed up his shoulder and everything else, and hasn't been quite able to work. So that's why he's on video games in the daytime.
Right.
And then he'd say, "Oh, what's your problem?" Well, I had excuses out the wazoo myself. And one of the first things I started to tell people, and it's kind of revealing right now, some people would learn, is that I would tell everybody I was working for my brother, that I was sitting at home monitoring the camera system that he has going on at his job. So the first thing I told everybody was, "Oh yeah, I got a job, but it's all from home." So well, I'm not sitting here doing video games. And oh, by the way, I've got to leave for 4 hours because I
Right.
got to go do some catching up on video review. No, that meant I had to go have a shower. I was doing things.
Right.
And the people I was talking to could trigger me. This is where I was building a social network while going through a lot of this. And I was learning things they were doing, and it was triggering. I took the OCD into the gaming world, but the gaming world actually would help. I was like, well, if I don't do anything, I'm not dirty. I don't have to have a shower.
Right.
So if I stay put, I'm in good shape. So my gaming then turned into like 15 plus hours a day.
Something we haven't touched on yet is Richard's brother Mike and the impacts of OCD on him and his life. He has basically become Richard's caregiver. As siblings, they have leaned on each other growing up through trying times, but now the bonds are understandably tested.
Mike had a girlfriend, and he had this girlfriend for about 8 years along at this point in time. And now I'd become extremely relied on Mike immensely. So if I needed a drink, Mike would go get the drink from the fridge. And I would use plastic cups. I wouldn't drink out of a cup out of the cupboard. So we would buy these things, and he would have to break them out of their packaging, and I'd stack them in a clean spot. And only I would touch the cups, and he would crack a can of pop or anything, juice, anything I was drinking, and he would pour it. So now when Mike's going, well, I'm not getting very much time with my girlfriend, I'm going to spend the weekend with my girlfriend. Before he would leave work on a Friday, let's say, and he's going to be gone for the weekend, I would go and I would use the bathroom because I relied on him to go into the bathroom after I was done and tell me it looked exactly the same way it did before I went in, that I didn't touch nothing. I didn't arrange nothing. I didn't interact with anything.
Right.
And he would. And then that would be it. And he would show back up on a Saturday afternoon and he'd be like, "Do you need to use the bathroom?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I do." So I had eaten, drank, used the bathroom or nothing since he'd leave for work on a Friday morning. He'd go spend the Friday night at his girlfriend's and show up at Saturday afternoon. And I'd get on my bed and go use the bathroom. And he would step back in and say, "Yeah, everything looks fine. You didn't touch nothing." He would go in there and make sure the seat was up and etc.
Right.
I didn't touch those things. He'd flush after, and this is the thing that developed where after I would have a 10-minute session with him of, okay, did you flush the toilet? Okay, did I flush the toilet? Did I drop the seat? Did I touch anything in there? Are you sure? Did you wash your hands?
Right.
And it would be a constant thing, and it would be like, now I got to ask him 3 times in a row. Now my brother is saying, I can't have very much of a life. I said, well, how about I come with you? So he'd drive all the way out to Ajax on a Friday afternoon after work. I'd load up in the vehicle and we'd go back and we'd stay at his girlfriend's place for the weekend. But once we got out of the vehicle and I'm in her place, everything was fine. Like I walked around her place like no problems. I got up and used her washroom, no problems. Sat out on the balcony, enjoyed the summer's nights, just chilling and having a few beers. No problems. We'd make sure it was about 10 or 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, loaded everything up just so I can get back and make sure I got in and out of the shower before dinner. Just, one thing I have skipped past in this, and it's not anything I really talk about, and it's nothing that's traumatizing to me, and it's not a triggering, but the very first weeks that we moved into the apartment, and I thought, it's a new start, I actually behaved normally for moving from Oshawa to Ajax, but it got overwhelming. And me and Mike actually had our very first fist fight. We never fist fought in our whole life.
Right.
And here we were, I was already in my 40s, and I'm having my first fist fight with my brother.
Wow.
And it resorted to where he was coming out where he was just tired of doing what he was doing and helping, and how much it's affecting his life. But my first things would be responsive going, well, what about mine? Look where it is. It's me. It's happening to me. It's happening. You're just helping. You can walk away. I can't.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's what I'm about to do. And we lived on the 5th floor. And as he said, I'm done, I'm leaving. And I said, well, then I've got no purpose here. So I actually went out and stood on the other side of the balcony. And I held on for dear life. And he just looks and he goes, you know what? Do us both a favor, please. And he had been drinking. He had about 18 beer in him at this time. And he grabbed his car keys. And he's never in his life ever done that. He's like, I'm going to Toronto. And he slams the door, and I'm standing on the other side of the balcony. And the only thing that stopped me from jumping was, my dear God, he can't drive drunk.
Right.
He's going to kill himself. I can't let him do that. So I'm in boxer shorts only. And I climb back over the balcony onto the balcony. My heart's thumping a million miles an hour, and I'm trying to beat him. And, the elevator is right at our door as well. So he's on it, and he's gone, and I'm go running down the stairs, and I'm sure everybody in the neighborhood's wondering what the heck is. And I go out there, and I've got a bottle of beer in my hand, and I'm telling him he's not driving, and I'm thinking I'm going to give him this beer and entice him, like, hey, buddy, we don't do this, we don't fight, we're brothers.
Right.
So I entice you back in the apartment. He's like, no way. So he's turning his vehicle on, and he's slowly backing up. Well, of course, I figured my next option would be that I'm pelting this beer bottle off the windshield. You ain't driving without a windshield. So the beer bottle went off the windshield. It didn't even make a crack. The bottle broke. Everything, bottles everywhere, glass everywhere. I'm standing there barefoot in the middle of the parking lot in Ajax in my boxers. It's 2 a.m, and he's got a beer bottle smashed across the windshield. I'm sure it was quite the topic for whoever was watching.
Absolutely.
And but that was getting to the trying part. That's where my family was getting very tired with this, and then it trickled into where, like, what do we do? You can't die in bed here. Like, you can't do this to yourself anymore. And when I did come and visit there at the family reunion in 2011, I was bedridden. That was one of my only times out that year, and I think earlier in the year it was to go out and do taxes in April. The second one was to be in September at the family reunion.
Right.
And you could see I walked around and talked to everybody, and ate and drank and everything else, and nobody would see what's going on the inside.
No, that's right.
And I took that home, and we left early enough so that I was going to be out of the shower before everybody's sleeping. So, we left early evening, and it was devastating because it's like I'm seeing family I'm meeting for the first time again, and, spending time with family that I don't see very much of.
Yep.
And it was a tug of war, and all I could do was go home and have that shower and, share the conversation with my brother about, oh, it was nice to see these people and see family and everything else. But it was right back to business. And I was like, well, let's just make sure everything's okay right now. And moving again in 2013, it just so happened that it was never on Mike's mind to buy a home. And especially with the conditions and things that we were doing, it was never enjoyable. It wasn't something that you'd sit there and say, oh, that'd be great. Let's move on to the next thing in life and everything. And by this time, Mike had already moved on from his girlfriend, and I'm sure my OCD had a lot to do with it. because at the beginning of his relationship with her, she was all about no, I'll just enjoy you coming and spending the day or two here on the weekend and a couple nights after work or whatever.
Right.
To where, hey, we've been doing this for 8 years. What's the next steps? And of course, Mike was like, well, there really isn't next steps because I've got a brother I have to really stick to here. Like I have to help. But now, as I was saying, Mike decided that, okay, well, a friend from work who took on a new job went into the real estate business, and they called him up and said, hey, you've got a pretty good job and everything else, but I never hear you talk about a home, etc. and things like that. What do you think about getting into a home? He's like, oh no, don't want nothing to do with it. They're like, why? And he's like, oh, it's a lot of responsibility, and I've got responsibilities already out the ass right now, so I don't want to. It's not whatever.
Right.
So she explained to him many ways that he can get into the home, and he can get with very little down, or with a proper down and things like that. So he just so happened to come home one day, and he's like, oh, I'm getting pestered by this old friend here about what to do. Well, one thing with my OCD is I would brainstorm everybody else's problems and trying to find a solution.
Right.
So when he mentioned that, I went right deep into well, she's right. If you did it this way and you used money that way, you could easily put down your 15% or 20%. You could do it that way. And then I see a light go on in his mind. And the first thing I said to him was, do you realize that if we live in a house, we no longer have to live in a building with other people in our surroundings and worrying about what they do? We'll have a whole property and a home that's yours. And it's like expanding the whole surroundings. And he's like, well, I'm not getting into it because, we can see how we already treat home. So that's a very expensive endeavor to take on and to treat it the way we would. And I thought, that's not fair. Like, he should be able to, if he wants a home, he should be able to do that.
Right.
Like, and that's what I said to him. I said, you buy a home, I'll drop OCD altogether.
Hey guys, just a quick call to action break. If you're a podcast connoisseur like myself, you know that a series will have sponsors and advertisers to help offset the costs of producing your favorite show. Myself, I prefer not to bother you with third-party services, but keep it between us. If you find value in it happening in Ontario, maybe you could buy me a Jameson's. Jameson's. I'll cover the overhead, and you get the tab. I'm providing a link to Patreon in the show notes, and it's a really simple process, and the series becomes ours, partner. Okay, so we're just wrapping up. Let's get back to the good stuff.
So he said, yeah, right. I said, I promise you. And he said, well, you remember the last promise, because that's what happened. I promised if we moved from Oshawa to Ajax, that I'll be good. And like I said, it lasted about 2 weeks and resulted in that evening I just spoke of a few moments ago.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not doing that again. I said, no, I really do promise you that it's a whole new thing. I don't know if he believed it or not, but he went forth and bought the house. He got it all. He decided in December to have it, and he bought it in May, and we moved in July. We've been here for 6 years.
So Richard kept his promise, and he was able to move his personal world from a bedroom to an entire house and even the yard. The thing is, OCD is a chameleon, and it takes on the characteristics of its surroundings.
Is you will take one issue and you will develop another. One thing is going to cover for another.
Right. So if you manage to successfully put one issue to bed, you're saying a new one will pop up.
Correct.
Okay.
And now you may recall that I said, hey, cousin Dave, we bought a house.
Yep.
And you might be able to come over and we'll sit in the backyard and have a fire and have a few beer and everything else. And you're like, well, that's cool. Let me know. Well, I'm there in a heartbeat. I haven't seen you in a couple of years.
Yep.
So these are things that happened in the very beginning. We invited my other sister. Patty. We invited her over, and she's got a son and a daughter, and she's like, well, okay, I haven't seen you guys in a few years. Like, we didn't even go to her wedding. Like, we've missed funerals, we've missed weddings,
Right.
we've missed big events in parts of the family's life.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, and she decided she wasn't bringing her husband because he was judging, and he was like, oh, like this is bullshit. I can't come there, on regular standard basis, and never could for years. I mean, you just go along. You just take the kids, go.
Yep.
So she came and she sat there and she's like, oh my God, oh wow, like this is great what you guys have got going on. And we, the kids got in the pool and swam, and they're leaving. I'm like, oh, you guys are welcome anytime. She's like, oh really? Like, and you got to imagine, she knows that I was bedridden and
Yep.
there was no one coming to the house. And
This is big revelation.
like, that's right. And she left, and it started where my sister had a friend that was starting to come over almost like every Saturday. And her and her son would come, and they would sit down at the kitchen table. And it was okay at first, but then I started to go and sit on the couch and stay pretty close by and watching what they were doing, kind of idea.
Right.
And I noticed the son, which was like about maybe 18 years old or 19 years old. He was told, obviously, when he come in, like, you don't pick anything up off the floor. Like, don't drop something and pick it up off the floor.
Right.
Don't do anything like that, because we still had some things like that.
Still some rules in place. Yep.
That's right. And we, for years and years and years, and it's still to this day, we painstakingly made sure we never gotten a fly inside our house.
Right.
And any things in the past 18 years, I can tell you that maybe in my house we've had, or anywhere in my living quarters, we had maybe 5 flies ever in 18 years inside the thing. So you can imagine the painstaking way to get in your house. Like, you're making sure everything's all closed up well, and get in and out of the door rather quick, so you don't let these things in. He happened to go out onto our deck. We had patio furniture on the deck, and a fly landed on the table. And he went to swat it, and he stunned the fly, and the fly was now docile on the table. There was a switch right there that I'm reminded of these horrors of things that, that really bothered me.
Right.
And I told my sister, I said, they can't come back no more, because he completely cannot follow simple rules to just don't pick something up off the floor. Don't do anything that will actually trigger my OCD.
Right.
And he's out there, and he was told not to do that kind of thing. And he swatted this fly and then proceeded to want to pick it up by the wings. This kid's disrespect of him showing up and doing what he did was starting to revert me right away to saying, okay, people can't come in.
So how many steps does Richard take backwards after this? Why is his brother Mike saying that Richard is candy coating everything? How does raccoon poop relate to one of the most bizarre stories you will ever hear? Find out on the next episode of Richard's Journey. It Happened in Ontario is recorded at Treblecock Studio in downtown Peterborough. For more information, go to treblecock.ca. Thanks as always to my dear friend Paul Thompson for the music.
I've blessed others, been blessed.